Hello old-timers and newcomers, I am Cool Scratches, and thank you for joining me to take another look at what I found. In my last review, I mentioned briefly one of my original inspirations for doing this was the Nostalgia Critic. However, he's just the guy who got me interested in doing film reviews. The guy who made me believe I could actually do it was the internet personality with the best hair, Decker Shadow. If you're an old-timer, you probably know that I've referenced him a lot in my earliest videos. Sort of like a prayer to above, invoking his name, making it seem like I know what I'm doing. It never worked, but it made me feel better. He showed me you don't need a production team, or a budget, or pull off intricate narratives with original characters to make a review interesting. All you need is a sense of humor and a sharp wit. Yeah, I'm still working on those two. But just because he showed me the way doesn't mean we see eye to eye on everything. Most obviously, he hates found footage. Or at least he's never found one he likes. Or maybe he's just been dragging on easy targets. I mean, all the ones he's reviewed are awful. I should send him Capture Kill Release, see if that changes his mind. But no more can this be seen more clearly than his review of Alien Origin. There's actually a lot of found footage movies that focus on dinosaurs, which makes sense. Dinosaurs are popular B-movie fodder, found footage generally has no budget, it's a marriage made in a fecal factory. Don't get me wrong, I haven't suddenly acquired taste. Most dinosaur movies are adventure films, where plucky ill-fits overcome the odds in the most thrilling, fast-paced action possible, and focus more on excitement than believability. Nothing wrong with that, even if you throw found footage at it. If anything, the way found footage places the audience right in the action can make for quite a roller coaster, or one of those virtual reality rides at Disneyland. However, while I mostly don't care how real monsters look in other movies, when the entire point is to look real, it is a bit distracting when certain games have better CG, and you can spot the epoxy on the teeth and the zippers along the barrels. And the reality is that's par for the course with B-movies. So you see the problem I have with dinosaur found footage movies. In my mind it just doesn't coalesce. But I liked King of the Monsters, despite how unreal that looked, so maybe all is not lost. Maybe it'll look fake, but look fantastic. Maybe the thrilling action, compelling characters and harrowing events will make up for any disparity in the fiction. I chose to compare it to Alien Origin. I couldn't even rip the freaking thing. I had to record it with OBS, and because of that, the video became a stuttering mess of like 3 frames per second in places. You should be happy my reviews are mostly slideshows. You may have noticed I haven't talked about the story yet, and that's because there barely is one. Here's a guy, there's a girl, here's more people, they're in a jungle, that's a bug.
It's on my face, Professor! Professor, it's on my face! Professor, it's on my face!
It was kinda funny. There's some trees, there's some moss, here's some dinosaurs, there's some bodies, that's a conference, here's some credits. And that's it! That's the whole review, I don't need to tell you anything else, let's just skip to the conclusion so this can be 2 minutes short. Okay, so I know I bought the thing, so it might seem like a waste not to review it, but trust me, you're not missing anything. Fine. I hope you enjoy it. Documentary filmmaker James meets up with presenter, producer and celebrity adventurer Michelle at her house. Camera already rolling, fucking professional. And if you think I'm padding, let me tell you what the first 4 minutes of the film contains. James being a dick, Michelle annoyed at James, racing through an airport, looking out an airplane, and close-ups of Michelle's face. I know what they're going for. Part of a documentary is to film literally everything, so later on choice cuts can be made for artistic editing. However, not only does keeping these clips in make no sense, which I will get to later, but it's so boring. In a decent found footage film, the downtime between events would be used for character development, setting up context, hinting at backstories, and so on. The movie does do that, but they're all very small details in very long cuts that do nothing but extend the runtime. Thus my comparison to Alien Origin. But let's compare it to another film Decker has reviewed where the similarities are much more obvious, The Dinosaur Project. In The Dinosaur Project, the camera is kept running at a lot of moments that honestly seemed contrived for the sake of telling a story, but they do tell a story. They establish things that come to flesh out the characters and make the events more interesting. Not to mention whoever edited the footage had the sense to pace the events to make them more dramatic. It made the things seem fake as shit even without the Discovery Channel quality CGI, but it made it more compelling and easier to digest. Here,
I have no idea what he's singing about, but he sounds happy, eh?
are you intrigued? John introduces them to the scientists, Tim, Lisa and Rob, and then they go to bed. In the morning, when on the road, Rob lets them know they're there to study human impact on the local ecology, specifically how evil corporate bastards like this guy are responsible for deforestation, farmlands, and apiarists needing a new hobby.
What the hell have you done? Did you do this? Are you responsible for this?
Just run up to this guy like a bunch of cartoon tweens after their first sociology lesson. So you might think that he's the bad guy responsible for all of this. Nope. Never comes up again. So then, he's symbolic, right? The movie has an environmental message, discouraging us from senseless consumption. Nope. Not even touched upon. Fucking stellar writing! I may as well take the opportunity to talk about the characters, but there really isn't much to say about them. Michelle reminds me of Scarlett from As Above, So Below, except she's never given a rundown of all her incredible achievements, making her even more boring. The only reason she's here is for a nice set of TNA. You might think I'm disgusting in saying that, but just wait. Most of the focus is kept on her, with occasional input from the side characters, but even so, she rarely has anything interesting to say other than arguing with James about cryptozoology, fanboying about Professor John, and overall just him being kind of a dick.
Have you ever seen like a real lion kill someone?
Yes.
Really? Like actually kill someone?
Yes.
He reminds me quite a bit of Troy from O Unilateralis with how disconnected from the situation he is. And that's not good, but he's a lot less rapey, so good for him. Then there is Rob, who was just speaking. He is just as boring as he seemed. Professor John is a poor man's Steve Irwin. Tim complains and adds to the body count, and Lisa is cute and adds to the body count. And then there's this local girl who is so unimportant, I'm not even gonna bother mentioning her. So why am I telling you all of this instead of letting it come up naturally as the film progresses? Because I'm bored and this is easier to write than to watch this thing again. I've just plumbed the depths of this movie, so let's get this over with. Someone misinformed the car guys and told them this is a horror movie, so their engine gives out and they have to stay the night. As darkness falls, peculiar, beastly roars sound from the shadows, and their guides realize, hey, our car is working, see ya! Abandoned in the wilderness with no sign of their guides returning, the group decides to make the best of it now that their car is working again, because consistency is hard. They make their way into the forest to begin documenting, studying, assessing, and they walk and walk and walk until they take a break for James to exposit some backstory on John. Seems he's something of a big deal in cryptozoology circles, which establishes that James is a horseshoe-wearing true believer, and Michelle is a cynic. And Professor John finds a milk snake. Genuinely, they're not trying to pass off a milk snake for a coral snake, they openly admit it's a milk snake. And Lisa gathers some moss, and they walk some more. And then it's nighttime. Then they hear some noises outside. Something gonna happen? Nope. The next morning, no one else heard anything. James is a prick, local girl is afraid but won't say of what, Michelle takes a dump, Tim finds a scorpion, Michelle don't believe in monsters, and they walk some more. Then they find a Burmese python. This time they do try to pass it off as something else.
It means there is an emergence of a new species in this region now.
No, not yet. Then Tim dislocates his shoulder, and James is a prick about it. Then they walk some more. Then Michelle tells James off. Then it's nighttime. What? Something happened? It did! Finally! How long? 58 minutes! And this shitting wait wasn't worth it. I appreciate Adam Sprintz, writer and director, using physical props instead of CG for special effects, but it's painfully clear they're plastic mannequins and not real creatures. And as far as cinematography, well, let's say Blair Witch, and you'll know whether you'd like it or not. In the confusion, all of the characters scatter to the dock, leaving only James and Michelle to huddle in fear in the camera light. They seek shelter in the dilapidated body of one of the many downed airplanes that litter the Amazon forests. And in the morning they are offered a crystal clear view of the monster that attacked them last night. And the body count has started. Fucking 67 minutes in. Buy a kid's toy off screen! I don't know anything about dinosaurs. Decker does. He probably knows the correct way for the scales to chafe around its grundle. I'm just going to point out the stiff movements, make it abundantly clear it's a freaking animatronic, but really I'm blaming direction here. A key point of showing off the real monster that is really there, for real, is for it to hold up under scrutiny. That's part of the reason why many shots of the infamous alien came down to glances and shadow play. But Adam Sprintz decided he really did not want to be one of those people who drag the audience along just to suggest the thing is there without showing it. Brave, but stupid. Oh, who am I kidding? I would have been furious if he tried to pull that. This actually makes the movie mildly more interesting. There is an attempt to make the movie frightening when James and Michelle scampers down the tree only to be forced to hide and remain quiet as the dino looms above them. But it doesn't work because not only has there been no tension or horror to the movie, but Spinks already showed us clear as day the creatures aren't real. That makes it a whole lot less frightening. For me, the most important thing in creature effects is how the creature moves. You make them look as if they're alive, you make them move as if they're alive. As far as I'm concerned, you're golden. They can look as plastic as you want, they can have the worst skin textures possible. Anatomy matters a bit, but that plays into the movement. You nail the movement, you make them move as if you're alive, you're golden. That's my take on it. But it's not Jim Henson puppetry we're dealing with here. With the predator off their backs, they make their way back to camp, hoping that anyone would have survived. The ruined settlement belies the fate of their friends, as both Tim and John wanders out of the forest not long after. The course of action seems clear: get out of the forest and survive. But the nipples beg their attention, because they have something to say.
The right thing to do is bury our friends.
All this character has contributed with is eye candy for pubescents. The issue is raised and dropped at a literal drop of the hat, making it completely meaningless and only padding the runtime of an already boring movie. Professor John takes the reins and leads them along a very obvious path, and the editor felt it was entirely necessary to include these long clips of walking and drinking and bullshit.
And look, all I know is nature's found a way.
Because any and all dinosaur movies has to reference Jurassic Park somehow. I think it's in an alchemist's notebook somewhere. And the movie just goes on, showing more inane shit like walking and climbing, and there's 20 minutes of movie left. So, you know what? Fuck it. We're about to speedrun this movie! Eventually, another dinosaur drives James from the group, leaving Tim the third wheel next to Michelle and James, who seem strangely glued together at the hip. I can only thank the stars Spinks was not so basic he had them end up being a couple. While they avoid the dinosaur, Michelle is mauled on the side. And I have to admit the gore prosthetics are pretty nice, but it's obviously just an excuse to have her lift up her shirt. As a fan of horror and erotica, allow me to say, that's not how you do blood play! This is. A quick bandage and they're off without issue. How fucking necessary this scene was. And just in case you think I was a bit harsh in referring to this character as a piece of meat, I didn't say James wasn't rapey, I said he wasn't as rapey. Poor choice of words. Of course I realize it's Spinks directing the actor to do it for the audience to gawk, but canonically this is still James keeping the camera right up Michelle's butt in this life and death situation. For all the movie's faults, the characters have been consistent, and it makes me worried what he might be up to. Thankfully, it's not explored. In another callback to Jurassic Park, the trio finds themselves trapped against a rock, and James announces the dino can't see them if they don't move. The whole scene comes off as comedic more than harrowing, and it may be a critique against how silly that whole idea is, because after a minute of staring the human dolls down, the dino chomps into Tim while Michelle and James run away. Finding shelter in a cave, they rest for a moment, and James tries comforting Michelle by spewing disconnected pseudo-profound nonsense about how they have to survive, so they can bring the footage back and show the world that these incredible creatures are real. Because it's not fucking embarrassing whenever the Jurassic Park sequels tries to pull that horse shit. Love and marvel at the monsters that are trying to eat you. Fuck you! 10 minutes of movie left. In the morning, they dare leave the cave, only to find themselves stared down by a dinosaur again. Not sure if it's the same one or another one of the same species. Either way, Professor John appears in the nick of time and pulls some proper Steve Irwin nonsense, where he attempts to intimidate the dino by acting stronger and tougher and literally leap at it with his knife. This suicide by Clade lets Michelle and James get away, only to find a car and floor it. But not before Professor John appears, somehow, and lets the dinos catch up with them. Footsteps thunder out of the forest, the car shakes, the camera goes black, and turns back on to show Michelle being rescued by locals, looking for the girl they brought with them. And in a twist I did not see coming, it turns out after the car crashed, the dinos were satisfied just eating James, off camera, and leaving Michelle and John to tell the story to the world. Which means what begun as footage recovered by some clandestine agency, where scientists went into the jungle to do science shit only to get eaten by dinosaurs, ended up being brought back by the survivors and shown to the public. The survivors brought the footage back. They survived! At its most basic, found footage revolves around video that was supposedly rediscovered after the people who recorded it either died or went missing as a form of brutal recollection of what happened. If the people who recorded it survived and brought the footage back, they could offer commentary. They could do interviews. They can pick and choose what isn't and is relevant to include in the video. They can turn it into an actual documentary. Here are some movies that get this right. The Tunnel, and Grave Encounters 2, The Fourth Kind, The Blue Skeleton, The fucking Phoenix Incident got this right. To have the characters survive and yet pretend the film is a rough cut of rediscovered video makes no sense! Allow me to summarize this movie the way only Decker Shadow could. If a director is worried the film they're working on will damage their reputation, they can apply to have their name removed from the credits. When they do, they'll be replaced with a pseudonym called Alan Smithy. Sounds like a good and easy way to retain a spotless resume. But there is a caveat. The Directors Guild of America has to be sufficiently convinced that studio meddling, interference from other personnel, or other inconveniences skewed the project beyond the creative control of the director, so the result does not reflect their creative vision. That did not happen with this film. That means Adam Spinks sat down and wrote this script with the intent for it to become this. He was proud to put his name on this. There is a premise and there are extenuating circumstances. There is adversity they have to overcome and there is a resolution. However, there is no dramatic pacing, little to nothing the characters do affect the plot. I didn't care whether they lived or died, their eventual fate was not satisfying, and I kept having to put down my phone after I already found it in my hand, rather than watch this movie. The sad thing is, it wasn't even frustrating like Unfriended or The Flower Tapes, it was just sheer, unadulterated boredom I felt watching this movie. About the setting, I'm torn. It's possible to accept they're really in the Amazon if you know nothing whatsoever about the Amazon. I know nothing whatsoever about the Amazon, so I did not realize they're actually in Wales. I feel a little bit embarrassed about that, but I'd like to believe I would have spotted it if the film had offered me a crumb of reason to pay attention, and no, Sarah Mack putting her ass in my face for 5 minutes was not good enough. Actors were nothing special, but not atrocious. Creature effects were bleeding awful, gore effects not so much, but none of that holds a candle to how boring this movie is. Being an artist, I can confidently say I would rather watch paint dry than see this movie again. At least then there'd be some fumes I could have fun with. The basic parts of a story are here, but in no way were they fleshed out to the point where you would call it ready. It feels like Spinks were given one day to come up with a finished script and then rely on his skills as a director to make it work. And the way he did it was push everything that would make a story interesting to the latter half of the film and padding out extremely slow and awkward character interactions with slow-moving scenes of walking. Developing the characters is important in any story, but not only do I think all of their motivations, all of them, could have been established in the first 15 minutes if the director could have been bothered, but none of it actually mattered in the end. The dinos just showed up, killed people, they ran away, dinos weren't scary, and I feel like I've wasted days of my life working on this nonsense. Extinction Jurassic Predators is a bad movie. Not laughably bad, not frustratingly bad, just bad. Questioning why I kept it running bad. I struggle to find a single redeeming quality about it, if not for your sake then for my own, but I really can't come up with anything. I don't recommend this to certain people, I don't recommend you go out and buy it, and I sentence it to a 2 on a scale of 11. Or as Decker would have put it, one screaming ninny with a bug on his face out of 5. I'm just hoping Decker wasn't planning to review this movie for Dinocember this year. If he was, I strongly hope he reconsiders. And you may wonder, Cole Scratches, haven't you said that you would never shame a novice film director for making a bad movie, that you admit a movie's positives by recognizing its negatives? Here's the thing, Adam Spinks is a successful film director, with movies like Spaceman and Like Glass to his name, both of which were well received. What is his excuse for this movie? Thank you all for watching. I have been Cole Scratches, and I hope you will join me again next time to take another look at what I found.
Guys, open the door! There's a dinosaur coming!